Welcome back, beautiful souls, to the Soul Collective podcast. It is my honor to introduce Jaime Tanna to the show. Welcome, Jaime. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I just first came across your work at the Shift Network, the Sound Healing Summit, and I was just really captivated and interested in all the different energy modalities that you were blending together and weaving in such an interesting way. And I thought, oh, it'd be so great to have a conversation. So I'm so excited to welcome you to the show today. And I would really love to begin by asking you, you have such an interesting journey. Both your parents, I understand, were pharmacists, and I know you went really deep into the professional route. So I'd love to hear more about kind of the twists and turns in your journey that has led you on the path that you're on today.
Sure, absolutely. I'll be happy to divulge a little bits of my background, what happened to me, or happened through me, I should say. So my dad was a pharmacist and my mum was a pharmacy technician, and they both worked in the pharmacy since I was very little. And I used to sort of be in the pharmacy and help out. And then as I got older, I was like kind of interested in medicine and what was going on, but wasn't really called to that path. I mean, it was sort of I was immersed into that environment, and I was really interested. And interestingly, I was very interested in the psychology of people. And also I started to correlate what was happening with patients as they came in. Like I used to see them going on secondary and tertiary medication. And then I would see my dad giving them another prescription, then giving my dad the prescription, that is, and then he would give him the drug. And I'd be like, surely there's some better way for them to heal. And, if the drug was causing, I don't know, say constipation, and then my dad would give them some sort of, I don't know, some sort of pharmaceutical that would help. I was like, can't they just eat dates? Or, what's the issue here? And it was really a long time ago, before complementary medicine and alternative medicine, yoga had really taken off. It was like when I was little, it was in the infancy stage. So we're talking about the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And so as I started to get older, I then went into what I would call the professional career route that everybody takes. So it's just like you go to university, you choose a career, and you kind of end up in this box paradigm. And that worked for some people, but it never really worked for me. I always had something inside me that was like, this is not working for me. And it was interesting. I chose law actually as a subject because I just couldn't think of anything. I thought, okay, well, it's a base. I will learn some skills and maybe it will go somewhere. But it was very interesting. I didn't really connect with it in the way that I thought I would, and then I was kind of felt really boxed in terms of sort of academia. So I went to Spain actually for a couple of years. I went to like an international college, learned Spanish, hung out in Barcelona. Then I stayed for another year and taught English, and it was really fun. And it gave me that vantage point, that necessary break, just to sort of disconnect from that very linear path. But then I was called to come back, and I did an advertising and marketing master's. Reconnected with my mum and dad in England, and I kind of ended up staying in London for a while. And then I also didn't really like advertising and marketing, so I was like, this industry is really shallow, doesn't really suit me again. I was like, will I ever find my way? Because my parents were like, what are you doing with your life? I was like, I don't know. I said, I'm just following what I think is good for me. And then it was very interesting because I then got into computing science and design and sort of web design development. So I was really interested in it. I was fascinated by this sort of how it was all taking off on the dot-com side. And this was before, when everyone thought, would the dot-com industry work? And there was that boom and bust. This was back in the early 2000s. So I worked from sort of 2002, I think it was. The dates are a bit fuzzy now, but up until about 2009, something like that. And it was such a wonderful industry. Like I just really found a fascination with how humans were going into sort of this digital era and how we were communicating. And this predated, of course, at least in 2002, 2003, was pre-Facebook and Twitter and everything. And then what happened though, as well, there's this saying Man plans and God laughs. So I don't know if you've heard that one. I'm sure you have. So I had this kind of plan, and I thought, oh, I'm doing really well. I really like this industry. I'll stay in it. It's actually something that I resonate with, and I thought this will be my path. But no, the universe had other ideas. So what happened was my dad actually got really ill. He had he had an intracranial bleed in the head, so he just collapsed at a what's called a PCT meeting, so primary care trust. He just went down like a ton of bricks. And he had some health issues. I mean, all pharmacists and well, nearly all pharmacists and doctors do. In fact, they're probably the worst people because they self-medicate, they don't listen, it's quite interesting to be around sort of medics and pharmacists actually. They're all, they have this particular mindset. Anyway, he really tanked, and it was a real shock to all of us because he was really on that kind of knife edge of life and death in the hospital, and he went into a coma. And luckily he survived. But for me, I went through this kind of awakening process with it. And I remember sitting in the garden at my parents' house, and this huge wave of peace washed over me. And I just sat there sort of stunned by it, actually. I mean, I'd always been connected to nature. I always loved nature, but this energy was something beyond what I could explain, And so there's this phrase, the peace that passeth all understanding. And so that was really what touched me. And I didn't really know at the time, but now I just refer to it as a word. I mean, you can't really box consciousness or the universe, but I just call it spirit now. So spirit touched me in a way that was irrevocable, really. And it was interesting. I didn't know if he would survive, but I knew that everything would be okay. That was the feeling that I had, that somehow I was being held. And so that prompted me into the journey that I'm on now. So that was back in 2003, and then Reiki found me. So I took the Reiki path, and I started to do the training to do hands-on healing first, so Tenahira, and then I did the training to become a Reiki master. And me being naive at the time, I was like, yeah, I know, you kind of, as a young person, you like, when you do your master, when people do their masters, you do actually learn a lot, but of course the life experience may not be there usually.
Mhm.
So I had a lot of life experience, but not as much as I have now, 20 years later. And the interesting thing is that was powerful for me, but it was the beginning, really. It wasn't the end. Becoming quote unquote a master. I mean, I never really was self-inflated with that word. I knew it was master as in self. You have to master oneself. You have to take the journey of consciousness. I always knew that. But
Mm.
of course, it was very much a beginning of a much larger process. And then that, not to sort of drag on the story too much, but that led into Karuna Reiki, which is to do with the voice. And so my voice started to change, and all these harmonics and started coming, and I was very interested in that. I was really fascinated. So I started to read and listen to works around that. So from Jonathan Goldman and Tom Kenyon. And then I went to Jonathan Goldman's sound healing in the Rockies, and that's why I was introduced to the didgeridoo, which absolutely wonderful instrument. So the hair stood up on my sort of neck, and my whole body was filled with electricity when I heard it, and I knew that I had to sort of take that path. And of course, today I've got my didge with me, so if the sound quality is good enough, we could do a little didgeridoo, and I've got my shamanic drum, so I can do the blend actually. Usually I play them separately, but the other day I did a sound healing for a client, and Spirit had me play the drum with my hand while I played the didge, and it worked quite well. So hopefully that will come out well today.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did that, and then simultaneously to the sound healing, I did something called spiritual response therapy and spiritual restructuring. So these are energy-based modalities where you're working at the more psychic level, the more medical intuitive side, health intuitive side, and dowsing. So that whole body response to the cosmos, basically. It's like that. What's fascinating about computers for me is that it's got a binary yes, no embedded response in the computer. It's ones and zeros. And of course, dowsing is very similar because you can ask yes and no questions, closed questions to the universe. And if you're still enough inside, then that's energy vibration comes through in terms of a download, in terms of a yes no response. And the other things that I was doing, just sort of to fill in the gaps, was the yoga journey. So yoga started to take on its own sort of dimensions again. So I was following kind of traditional yoga. I did hatha yoga, yoga flow. I actually started with Bikram, the hot yoga, because it was very trendy back in 2008, 9, 10. It was before before Bikram had all that craziness going on in the media. And so hot yoga was very, very popular back then. So I got into that kind of London vibe. And then I went to Thailand to do some training in the hot yoga. And then, but my journey took me away from that. It took me into more kind of the sound aspects of yoga because I was really interested in sound, and then also the flow. So all of this is combined to, this is why my pool is quite diverse. And so when I work with clients, I just sort of tuning in and using sort of a blend as guided by spirit, really, just tuning in, take a case history and then tune into what they need, basically.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, so many different modalities that you've been drawn to and deepened into. And, it feels like from your sharing that your father's experience was such an activation of your soul mission and opened you up to really diving deep and exploring energy medicine. And I'm really excited to explore with you about the medical intuition with sound healing and Karuna Reiki. So many different fascinating modalities there. But I'm curious to ask you, in that kind of turning moment with your dad, where he was really, on the brink of sort of life and death, and sort of traditional pharmacy background, has he become more open to energy medicine since that experience?
My dad actually changed a lot over 20 years nearly. He passed away in 2022, so he's no longer with me. But he had a flowering of consciousness actually. So if you follow the teachings of Tolle, Eckhart Tolle, some people call him Tolle, but anyways, I call him Tolle. He talks about this awakening process and how the challenges actually are the path, are the process. And so what I very much saw in my father was that he started to have an undo. He started to question everything. He started to ask, why has this happened? And let that kind of sit with him. And we had sort of deeper discussions as time evolved. I mean, initially it was really difficult because he had this organic brain damage, and he was very lucky actually. He didn't have paralysis or anything, but it was more like an irritating quality in the brain. So there was mood swings and all kinds of things. And then he was on this really heavy medication. But really over time, he started to accept energy healing as a tool because he accepted, not from me, but I found people to initially to help him. And I said, look, your meds are not working that well for you. Maybe you should try some other things to help you stabilize, to help you feel better. I just kind of put it in layman's terms for him. And he was open to it. He was skeptical but open, so that was a good thing. And
Mm,
then he and himself, of course, once you experience a change, then you no longer need the rational mind to verify it in a way. Like, a lot of people want the study before they try something. At least not everybody, but a lot of people today, like, oh, show me the study, but they don't realize that each person's map is very unique, and so studies are only pointers to the truth, and they may or may not be your truth.
mm,
So he just found his way relaxing into things, and then he became more sort of vulnerable, emotional. So that, for my sister, for example, she was like, oh no, what's happening to him, he's becoming sort of more, more like a woman, she said to me. And I said, well, no, that's fine. I said he's just opening up to a different aspect of himself, different dimension.
yeah,
And really over time I saw softening, which actually then led to this flowering of consciousness. So it's very beautiful. And then when my
beautiful.
son was born, it was such a beautiful moment for my dad, and that really also helped him, just become more of that sort of grandfather caring type to
Yeah,
my Jaden, and it was such a beautiful thing to experience. So I really feel, even though my dad passed, I had a lot of special time with him because I already passed through that time where he almost could have died when I was quite young. So all the time that I had with him, I already was giving thanks for that. I
yeah,
was ready. You can't really prepare for death because death is such a lightning bolt, especially when it's somebody very close to you. But that initial sort of shock and the journey that I took with him put me in a place where I was more ready, I should say, than I would have been otherwise.
yeah. What a profound experience for both of you. And do you feel as though there was maybe a conscious or subconscious block or resistance into moving into more of the metaphysical, into more of the energy work, and staying in more professional, traditional realms of discipline? And that was maybe opened up or dissolved through that experience?
You're talking about myself. For me, was there any sort of block or resistance? There wasn't really resistance. I was really fascinated by this whole field, but what there was fear, as in fear of judgment from other people. Like, what will my parents think? What will society think? Can I make a living from it? These were the things that were coming up. It wasn't. It was going from quote unquote stability to instability or no ground, I guess. So there was
Totally.
there was no basis really for what I was moving into. So I was sort of winging it actually at the beginning. I was like, well, I had all these skills and I started to use them in my business. I mean, being able to sort of build your own website and use things digitally, but even when I started was very important. And I like the whole idea of being very versatile online and remote and sort of nomadic. And my parents were like more kind of bricks and mortar, old school. And but the interesting thing is my dad was self-employed ultimately. He was a pharmacist and he was self-employed. So he had a very successful pharmacy practice and he actually was very, very good business person. And he used to serve the local community, I'll give you an example, take oxygen cylinders to the elderly, do things for the local council, run around doing things for people. A side note is as an independent, my dad was like this. He loved the limelight as well. He ran for London mayor when it first came into when it was, I think it was Ken Living, I can't remember his last name now, but anyway, he was running for mayor. There was this whole kind of the first mayor of London. My dad decided he was going to throw his hat in the ring or whatever. So that kind of shows you the kind of person he was. Um, but he was a business person ultimately. So I think not through anything that he taught me specifically, but just being around him, I kind of had that energy of I want to sort of do things for myself. It'd be great to have my own business. So although I was a little bit nervous about going into this field by myself, I kind of had that kind of osmosis from him that there was this filtering down of, you can do things for yourself. You don't have to. And also when he got sick, I was working for this company and I realized how precious my time was. And the company I worked for was actually in London and it got bought out and relocated. Like it was a hellish journey for me basically. Went from like a nice half an hour journey into London because I was in a suburb and I went into central London to work in the sort of dot-com industry, so it was like Soho. And then it got moved to this place in, I think it was Welwyn Garden City if I remember rightly, and it was just, for me it was a horrendous journey because it was like a tube, a train, another tube, walk on both sides. It was like 2 hours. And
Mm.
then I had my father who was sick and I just thought, you know what, there are moments in your life when you just have the universe pushing you into some sort of decision point, and that was my decision point. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I need to have more control over my time and my energy in
Yeah.
particular, and I want to spend more time with my family who are very precious to me. So that whole kind of thing then was driving me as well. So it was like this pull to because I loved it, and then into this whole aspect of
Yeah.
consciousness. But there was also a push. It was like I don't want to
Get
be
out
in this.
there.
Yeah, yeah, I don't want to be in this anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Jamie, I feel like so many people can relate to what you're sharing. I know myself personally in my journey of, more of the stable income with corporate, working in corporate for many years, and then taking sort of that leap of faith to start, my own business. And I know that it is a journey, right? It takes time to build your own practice and create that sustainability. But I'm curious if there's anything that stands out to you that was really helpful to be able to, create a thriving practice doing what you love.
Well, I apply my own sort of principles. What I teach my clients, I apply to myself. I've always believed that really consciousness is primary in everything, and that includes in work. So the quality of your consciousness determines the result. And in our society today, we're quite future oriented because we do things for the end result. So actually slowing down and living really the power of now, being in the present moment, is an undo. It's reversing the sort of the social conditioning, the programming. And so what I believe is was been very helpful to me, apart from sort of having a plan of becoming, wanting to teach and serve. Service for me is probably the highest calling. So I think it was Martin Luther King who said, anyone can be great because anyone can be of service. The issue is, of course, is also linking service to an income. So having to self, which is a self-worth issue, actually, normally.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of places where people can go for healing in churches, for example, and mosques and Hindu temples. And there's this, even yoga itself, if you trace back the roots of yoga, then there was this guru relationship where it's not really for money. So the interesting thing is money can become a dirty word, or get in the way of whatever's going on. So it's a real art to sort of being of service and holding your value. That's what I found along the way. But if you're not if you're not supported in an ashram, and you haven't got a bunch of devotees giving you money, then you have to, if you have a kid, and I've got a son, for me, I was like, I need to support my family. This has to be real work. Otherwise, I'm going to be working all hours of the day supporting people and doing this work, and then I'm going to have to go and find a job somewhere, which would be crazy, because then that's not sustainable. So I kind of was more of a winging it kind of person, which was good for a while. It was like just seeing where that vision would take me, and so just so teaching was always part of it. Like seeing clients in person was part of it, and then doing yoga or breath work or sound healings, and then actually passing that knowledge on. And then actually my work took off in, I think it was 2009. So I was doing a lot of in-person stuff until that point. But
Mm.
then, so way before COVID, because from COVID, everyone's been funneled into this kind of online digital, people have become more receptive to it, and certainly more comfortable with it. So what was fascinating was a lot of people started to want more remote healings, because, if you live in Florida or Mexico or Australia or Germany, you're not going to just jump on a plane to come for a healing, quote unquote. So it's a bit crazy, maybe crazy money. I did have one client who used to get on a plane and come to me from Ireland, which I thought was nuts. I said to her, you might as well just do it remotely. Because for me, I mean, I understand that paradigm now, but when I first came across the whole concept of remote healing or distant healing, my conscious mind was like, oh no, this is, a load of rubbish, this is nonsense, what is it? And but I was skeptical open. So that meant I at least explored it, and I found Russell Targ and his books on ESP, and how huge amount of data showing this is a real phenomenon. It exists. It's not just exist, it's documented, and governments have spent millions or billions on it.
Mm.
Um, but that's obviously the intellectual level, and you have to have the experiential level always to really know something is truth. And I think there's a Indian saying about, the taste of one grain of a mustard seed is better than seeing a truckload of it, right? So I think people need to remember that it's your direct experience of something that makes it truth. And so I started to investigate, and I'd ask for healings from different people who were offering the healings at that time that I thought were safe, that were in their integrity, and then I would just tune into my own energy system, my own energy body, and see what kind of receptivity I had. And actually, it was pretty powerful stuff. So I was like, okay, this is real for me. I'm feeling things in my body I don't normally feel. I can feel the energy currents when the healing's being sent. Maybe some things would change, like some illnesses would disappear, or backache would go, or whatever it was. So it became a tangible, real experience for me. And it wasn't just in my head, it was in my body.
Mm.
So then I was like, okay, I need to see more about this. And then this whole working with my own consciousness, which I call spirit, doing spiritual response therapy, SRT, and spiritual restructuring. So look, sort of sensing at the kinesthetic level what's going on with the client, and then through this process of dowsing, just sort of cleaning the energy template, I guess, of what's going on in that body. So for me the primary aspect of health is consciousness. So if the energy system is out of balance, then sooner or later, then the organs and glands will reflect that, or some part of the body will go out of whack. There are times, of course, when it's quote unquote just physical. But even in Reiki, we talk about hibiki, which is the kind of the vibrations or the disturbances in the etheric layer or the subtle layer of the body
Yeah.
that's not picked up by science. And so there are all these interesting correlations for me going on, as well as real experiential knowledge. So therefore, all of this helped me understand this two-way energy flow. And then obviously through intention. So Lynn McTaggart wrote about the power of intention in her famous books, and she wrote about the field. And that was all part of kind of my awakening too. Like I met Dr. Bruce Lipton when he wrote The Biology of Belief, because he was in London, and there's a whole bunch of synchronous events. So all of this really was an exciting phase for me, and it's carried through. I've never lost my, I suppose, awe for the universe, like just being in that childlike
Mm,
receptivity. And my son, who's he's 6 now, but he's going to be 7 soon, but he's still got that wonder about life. He sees life very pure, and just everything is fun, and it's an exploration. And so it's
mm.
really important to me to maintain that. I mean, not because that is the gateway for the higher consciousness in a way. Like when everything becomes very serious or deadpan, then things become more difficult, I think, in life. And so that playful energy can also help us carry through when we have challenges as well.
Yeah, 1000%. I love that. And, hearing you speak, it's like such an attunement to energy, attunement to consciousness. And one of my favorite books is this book. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called Healers on Healing. It's a compilation. I don't even actually know offhand who the authors are, but it's a fabulous book, and it's fascinating because you hear all of these healers and their take on energy and consciousness, and how the mind impacts the body, and different modalities or approaches that we can take to really deepen into healing. And so I feel there's such a sensitivity. When I was going through my own awakening journey, my guides really guided me to be more meticulous about my energy. That was kind of like a first step in my process of like, okay, being very particular about the foods that I was eating, the people I was surrounding myself with, every single thing that impacts our vibration. And so I would love to kind of explore that with you, and how maybe there's aspects of energy, aspects of consciousness that we can really bring to the forefront of our consciousness, to be more in tune, to have, a even higher vibrational experience here on this earth plane.
Sure, that's a good topic. It's quite a broad topic again. So much depth to that, and so many nuances. So for me as well, the same aspects of what you're talking about are important in terms of environment. So I don't spend any time watching mainstream news or media. For years, I've disconnected myself from that. I pick up things maybe on social, but people are like, don't you want to know what's going on? And I'm like, no, I don't want to feed my negative ego with a lot of nonsense, actually. A lot of it is just knee-jerk responses to life, causes a lot of pain and suffering in the heart. And unless we're actually taking action on that, so we can do something to change that vibration, what's the point in ingesting it? I always say to people, you eat particular foods, and you're particular about the foods you eat, so be particular about what you ingest mentally and spiritually. That is impacting your vibration. And so we can look at the sort of the human aspect of consciousness is very interesting, isn't it? I mean, so I think one of the dangers, I think, for me, is sometimes we can try to be too spiritual and then disconnect from being human. So there's a caution there for me, just in my kind of whole life experience. But ultimately, we do need to refine our vibrations. So, to embody all of it, and understand that sometimes life is gritty, things go wrong, there's loss and suffering. It is the opposite side of the coin. So if we're looking at real transformative work, and right now, as far as I am aware, Pluto is transitioning, so we are entering the age of Aquarius. But Pluto is a very strong archetypal energy, and it deeply transformative, and it doesn't mess around. So if it's impacting you, it's not like, oh, it's all sunshine and rainbows. No, it's like destroy and rip up and tear apart whatever it is going on, whether it's your finances, relationship. It can be like a void or a black hole that sucks everything out of your life, and you think everything is collapsing. So this is deep transformational work, and then from the ashes you're reborn, or the lotus, you're the mud. You start to really work with that mud and come up, but you don't disconnect from the mud. Interestingly enough, you're still the lotus. The root is still in the mud. So the thing about vibration, though, is yes, what we eat or don't eat. For example, I would, there's a polarity consciousness right now. So you have to be very careful, I think, as a human race, because you can see it on social media, and ever since COVID as well, like whether it's a war, whatever war, pick whatever war you want going on right now or recently, pick COVID, pick veganism versus meat eating. It tends to split and polarize dramatically. So there's no real tolerance anymore. And so we have to come back to maybe that quote from Rumi about beyond right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. And so, I always used to say, where's this bloody field? Especially when you're in dynamics like where you polarize. It's very difficult to hold that inner ground, that stillness. But I would say that, for example, it's a personal choice. You have to tune into your own energy. And so, for example, if you're going to be vegan, I don't like a top-down approach where media are telling you, you must do this, and so therefore, if you don't, you're destroying the environment. Because it's like it's usually a step-by-step process. It's an evolution. And also, if someone's very used to eating, I don't know, say meat and fish, and they go very quickly into just eating sort of raw vegetables and fruit, and they may detox too quickly and have all kinds of effects. They may also not feel right physically. They might get headaches. Who knows? There may be all kinds of reactions to that. So it's more about an internal shift, first of all, and then it's a letting go. So over time, experimenting, like replacing meat with more vegetables. And then also there's this push. I see one of the things I've written about on my Substack, which is a focus for me right now, is like a lot more writing and getting podcasts out like yourself and doing more sound meditations that people can access. What I was talking about was, for example, the creep of canola oil. Now, canola oil, from what I understand, is that it's a artificial oil and it can be very damaging for the body. Anthony William, who I've been following since 2015, he's known as the medical medium, and he spoke about this a long time ago. So that just had an immediate resonance for me. And when I dowsed on it, I got a yes from spirit, and and so I tend to avoid it as much as possible. But it's literally in everything now. I mean, you can't find a product, even a healthy packet of crisps or chips, as you call it in the States, like Kettle here, with just and it's all loaded with colorants and stuff. So all of these things, they may not kill you immediately, but they will have an impact. So if you're trying to be, the irony of all of this is, if someone's trying to be conscious, and then they go to eating lots of artificial plant-based burgers and lots of vegan stuff on the shelves that are quote unquote healthy. Is it really healthy? Are they really tuning into their body? Is their energy good? Is the food full of life? Has it been grown with love? It's usually, if you're going to make a transition like that, it's much better to go into maybe eating a bit of raw food, so more salads and lightly steamed veg, and then learning how to make your own sauces, quality sauces that could then impact your body so that your body's invigorated with that life energy. I mean, I'm quite lucky. So I grew up my mum's from Trinidad and Tobago, and my dad's from Tanzania, and I grew up in the UK. So I had my mum was a great sort of cook or chef, and she taught me a lot. So I grew up with this really good palate and was able to really whip up things really quickly. And then when I started to sort of transition, I was vegan for a long time. I've gone back to eating a little bit of fish now because spirit told me there was something going on in my body, and it was an intuitive download. So I listened to that. And what happened when I was vegan, I felt really great. But then, you keep the message for me was keep listening to your body, because people assume that it's always a one-time, one-stop deal. Once you're in this path, if you're mentally fixed on something, then you stop listening in a way, and then you can have real-time impacts on the body. And the interesting thing is, because the body seeks balance all the time. So homeostasis, it's always, that's a double-edged sword. So it's great because the body's fighting for life, it wants to be well. At the same time, you take an action today, and and you repeat it, you might not see the effects of that action for a year or two or even 5 years, and it's that repeated action over that time frame, and then suddenly the body reaches that tipping point towards disease, and you've got some sort of mineral imbalance, or something has, quote unquote, not gone wrong, but it's like the body then is saying something's wrong now in this moment, and then you have to sit in your consciousness and look at what's going on. And that's why I think it's very important, to go to, obviously your doctor, but to also go to complementary practitioners, sort of functional doctors. For me, functional doctors are trying to sort of bridge the gap, and so they're sort of leaning more towards that energy medicine point of view.
Yeah.
But it's a real, you just have to sort of listen to that deeper wisdom inside. I mean, when it comes to meat, though, for example, I always say to people, if you want to eat meat, that's entirely your choice, that's fine. But then look at how the animal's been treated. Now, and again, you can get into this polarity where people go, if you just eat animals, you're super cruel and you don't care about the planet, and there's a lot of name calling and judgments. But we can't just have that, from my point of view anyway, that holier than thou judgment of other people, because they're not in that place. And then also, it's much better to encourage someone to change than to sort of beat them over the head with the stick. And the interesting thing is, if you encourage people, they may actually want to change and let go of that process. For me, for example, if someone's eating meat, so when I was transitioning for a while out of sort of that kind of more heavy energy, I'm going to call it, meat eating, and because that's what I grew up with, and often people are following traditions, whether you're Scottish or Indian or African, there are certain traditions, and they have their roots in eating certain things. So, but the thing that's most harmful, I think, to people is if an animal has been tortured. So say, for example, you've got these massive cage factories where chickens never see the light of day, and their legs are kind of, it's really horrible stuff. Their legs are burnt off with ammonia. And so that's what I say to people. I say, look at where your food is coming from the land, and how has it been treated? Why are you, as a yoga teacher of mine, was in her 80s, and when I was living in Cape Town for the last 3 years, she always said, what you eat today is walking around you in 3 weeks, inside of you in 3 weeks. It's literally part of your matrix. So but the thing is, people are not attuning to their subtle vibration, and how the disturbances of what they're eating then become their own disturbances, you see.
Yeah.
So if they eat this tortured animal, then what will happen is so if you think about it on the physical level, the animal will be releasing cortisol and adrenaline. So it's already corrosive to the actual tissues, and so on the physical level. And then on the energetic side, the chicken or the animal is disturbed mentally, it's suffering, it's got that vibration in it, it's fear-based vibration. So that's what you're absorbing. And so that's a very yogic thing to say as well. I mean, yogis would always talk about that. And I'm a Kriya yogi as well, so I followed the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote many books, but his famous one was the autobiography of a yogi, which is an amazing, really, when you read it, your mind is blown at just exactly how much he knew and what he was pulling in from the field. But as an enlightened being, he really spoke about the vibration of food, and he spoke about this as well. And he said, you have to look at the subtle vibration. But for someone who's not attuned, you see, to the subtle vibration, then it's very difficult, because they're in that sort of mental headspace, and kind of there's a disconnect. So techniques like yoga, where people are breathing consciously, moving their bodies, and just breath work itself, or sitting meditation, where they're becoming much more attuned, that then helps them know, I think, at a visceral level, what's going on with their body, and they can start to make the correlation. But until that happens, then it's just a concept, you see, and then there's a disconnect.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful point in sharing. It really opens us up to begin attuning to our energy. And like you said, it's a subtle, a gradual process, whether, dis-ease is accumulating in the body, that happens over time. And same with, a level of really attuning to and raising our vibration. It's not something that, necessarily happens instantly, though, we can have great shifts. And I feel, one observation and kind of looking at your life and how you've, really intentionally, created such, different modalities and disciplines is a level of embodiment that it speaks to, of really, finding these disciplines that you love and bringing them into your everyday life, whether it's, surfing, or whether it's sound healing or Reiki, or, whatever the case, cooking, or things like this. And I feel, the embodiment of really, enjoying the process, enjoying the practice is so powerful.
Absolutely. That it's very, very important, whatever path anyone takes, and particularly, it was always for me that if there wasn't a certain level of coherence, wasn't a certain level of enjoyment and connection, then I knew that it was the mind, as in the ego, coming in through the back door. Because there is a tendency, and that's why it's important, I think, to have that reflective quality, and also, have people around you that you can have as part of your awakening, because it's very easy to get hooked by your own patterns, and for the ego to usurp even the positive. That's the frustrating thing, I think, for most people at the beginning, that even the positive can be used by the ego to inflate its own sense of self. So it's really important to just stay humble, I think, and grounded as much as possible, and not so stay in that enjoyment, and be, as Jesus said, be, unless ye be as little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven, as in
Mm.
kingdom of heaven being right here, right now, that joyful connection to God, to spirit, to the universe, whatever you want to call it, it's just a word. And so that cultivation comes from that deep place within. And we know, because we feel resonance.
Mm.
Each person, I believe, I feel my role is yes, to give insights as I receive them, but it's often the case that the client will know, or the patient knows what's going on with them at a deep level. They
Yeah.
just can't access their own wisdom, because the mind is in the way, or there's some fear and doubt. And this is normal process anyway. I mean, it's not like we go from if people think this awakened state is that we suddenly let go of fear or anxiety and doubt, but actually it's all part of the mix. And so a awakened state is actually leaning into what's uncomfortable, being present with what is unknown and what is unfolding, and then letting go of this kind of idea that there's a linear path. I mean, it is a path, but it's a spiral, and sometimes you go down. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just you don't always go up. And so there's that inner birthing of consciousness that's happening, though. So I try to remind myself, and remind my clients, that when the difficult time comes up, because on the level of form, it's very unstable, as Toller will also point out. So I love what he says. He always says, this is, well, it's ground, Pema Chodron as well, the Buddhist nun. I love her work as well, and that's influenced me greatly. And she says the same thing. It's making friends with uncertainty, and also leaning into what is uncomfortable and painful, and being present with that, so that we don't escalate suffering. But sometimes, even as a healer teacher, there are times in our own lives where, for me personally as well, where things have just gone wrong, just on the level of form, that no matter how much intention setting there is, or how much prayer, or whatever it is, it's just, and there's a humbling process with that, because it's to keep the ego in check, I believe. It's
Mhm.
so that we can evolve with grace, and not get sort of that big head, as it were, because it can happen, and it's just an undo again. It's like to allow that grace to come in, and often grace is coming in when there is loss or suffering and death and pain of some kind. And that's the thing that most people go, oh my God, no, I don't want any of that. But the thing is, if we don't, as human beings, if we don't embrace that, we face it anyway, sooner or later. There is going to be, on the level of form, some sort of dissolving loss, because it's the opposite side of the coin. We come in, even my son, he's so cute. He's like so little, and we have these conversations about life and death. And he doesn't fully understand, but he understands. He's interested in it. He was very, just like I was when I was very awake as a child. I was very interested, and people thought it was a bit weird, but that was because that was my path, and I was very interested in that whole journey. So it's important because I don't think, in general, still even today, even with the tools that are available and there's a lot more today that people can access. If you look at education systems, they're still very slow in adopting, this, and they're still very linear and they're still very academic. And it's almost like the richness and fullness of life, it's almost like it has to come from the parents, from the grandparents, from healers and teachers, from indigenous, from shamanic journeys. It's not coming from that place yet. It's not integrated into the schooling system. The schooling
Yeah.
system is still very much, that
3D. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that you touched on food because I feel like, more and more people are awakening to the fact that food is medicine, can be, and, impacts us on a cellular level. And I feel like there's also, this awareness around sound. Sound healing is really becoming more and more popular. And I'm curious to ask you how you're combining that with medical intuition.
Okay. So what I tend to when I work with my clients is, first of all, I sort of looking at so I'll ask them what's going on with them in terms of their health. I prefer to have an open, candid discussion, and then I'm listening between the lines, as it were, to sort of really see the picture and to look inside, what is playing out. Now, sometimes through dowsing, I get very quick responses from spirit, like, and it will say it's a particular energy or program that's underpinning that. So to clean the program. So for your kind of audience, I'm sure some of them would know anyway, but if you look at the teachings and the writings of Edgar Cayce, the mystic, he was very in tune and he read from the Akashic. So for me, Akash means boundless space from the Sanskrit, and we're all part of this living database of consciousness, and we're uploading and downloading information all the time. And we get these impulses to act, not act. I mean, we also have free will, which makes it very interesting. Like we might get an insight to move on something, and then we don't, but it's still part of the Akashic. That's the interesting thing. It's still part of our digital database that we can access, and we're affecting it all the time in real time. It's an incredible thing. So I think is it Kevin Tadashi? He's written about Cayce, and I think it's brilliant. If anybody wants to research a little bit more, and it's kind of more layman accessible, so it's not like you have to go through hundreds and hundreds of case studies that Cayce did, but it's fascinating. So with sound, what I do is I clean the energy body, the template. Maybe I'll give some advice on batch flower remedies, for example, and maybe some tissue salts or whatever spirit tells me that person needs. I always, because it's legal anyway, to always say to people, you must continue to see your doctor or your medical, because that's just that's the law. So they have to work within that paradigm, that framework. But it's entirely possible that as they make changes and they eat different foods, and they do certain things, that the body vibrates differently and therefore it changes. Sound is very powerful because sound creates form, and you're a sound healer, so you know this. And there's these beautiful cymatic images where you're putting the vibration of sound into a medium, like whatever it is, a liquid. And so scientist John Reed, who I did some training with through Shift Network, he was showing these beautiful images again, and it's incredible to see that that's coming from sound. So sound is primordial form. The consciousness of the person rides on the sound current, and so there's this incredible dynamic where the sound is literally creating new structures inside the human body, and actually vibrating out anything that's disease oriented. So I remember when I had, in my early days, when I had a client come with a non-union fracture, which is basically where the bone isn't healing, and it was the femur, and her bone surgeon was saying she's going to have surgery, and he would have to cut open the leg, cut the bone, fuse it together, and she would have a shorter leg. So she was in quite high level of distress. And in those days, I was still very open to the possibility of a miracle, but I said to her, I don't know if this is going to work. I said, you medically you have to keep doing what you're doing. But I said, sure, we can definitely, we can use whatever we can. So I did some cleaning of the energy body. We did this. I asked, through muscle testing on the body, so applied kinesiology. I asked if the body had received the program, the new message. It said yes, it was testing strong. And then I said, let's use some sound. So I used different sounds with the voice and then with the didgeridoo and the drum and everything. And so created that container for the body to do what it needed to do. So the body always has its own ability to self-heal, always. That's for me, is the body is spirit, or an aspect of that triune being, body, mind, spirit. So she then went away, and I said to her, well, I don't have x-rays, I don't have the medical knowledge or the tools to really. So I said, I'm getting that it will heal, so maybe just push the operation off a little bit if your surgeon agrees, and then see. And then within, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, bone started healing, and she was so happy, and I was happy, and she was relieved. And so it was a real, insight into the fact that, the body can suddenly start healing, because once you sort of clean out whatever the blocking vibration is, then the body repatterns itself, because, we know that stem cells, they form, but still medical science is unsure as to how, how do these cells suddenly turn into whatever it is. And so there's many, anecdotal stories, and people are like, who are more scientific might be a little bit more skeptical. But the thing is, when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of these stories floating around, it's showing very clearly what the ancients knew, what the mystery schools knew in ancient Egypt, and that we literally are vibrating fields of energy, and that the body, is energy. It's basically made up of, and so quantum was today is showing us the same thing. So just to answer your question, so it's like clearing the energy template, and then working with the client. Maybe there's some other insights or guidance, and then using sound to repattern the structures, so to allow the body to do its healing, I guess.
Yeah, what you're sharing is so exciting, and I think it's such a